live again, back on YouTube for the final episode of this series of Queer Confab. Today we're going to be discussing faith and queerness. We're going to be chatting about the complexities of maintaining one's faith while being part of the LGBTQIA+ community. We'll discuss challenges, support networks, and the evolving relationship between religious institutions and LGBTQIA individuals. Joining us this evening are two familiar faces with Queer Confab. Both of you guys have been in multiple episodes of these now, but we'll introduce yourselves again for those people that do not know you, and just tell us a little bit of where you currently stand with your faith. So Edward, we're going to start with you. Introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and your faith.
It's always me. And also,
you are the sacrificial lamb. It just is what it is.
Yes, indeed. I am the Paschal Lamb, etc. Well,
Mm.
firstly, I've got to say this because I know a friend of mine is going to watch this episode, if not live, then later. I have to say, in fact, he's watching now because I just got a message from him. I'll start with the faith. Sorry, that is an ancient in-joke that I'm now going to pretend I didn't say because this is getting too long. I am Edward. I am currently a divinity student up in Aberdeen, and I am training to be an Episcopalian priest, which is better known in the world that isn't Scotland and America as sorry, he's messaged me again. It's better known in the world that isn't Scotland and America as an Anglican priest. So I am a practicing Christian, therefore, and that's all there is to say for me, basically.
Amazing. Leo?
My name is Leo. My pronouns are he, him. And I am a practicing Christian. I was baptized and took my first communion as a Catholic, and then later was confirmed as an Anglican. And have been going to church my whole life and come from a religious family.
Amazing. I'm your host. Again, as per usual, I'm Zoe. I would identify as an ex-Christian, I think. I no longer practice any faith. I no longer feel the vibes of any faith. I was discussing with these guys earlier that I do, however, very much enjoy my crystals. Maybe slightly Wiccan, but I wouldn't say I identify as that. But anyways, enough about me. I want to ask you guys slightly more about your personal journeys with faith. So can you guys share a little bit about that? How you got into faith and how you've navigated faith throughout your lifetime so far? Because we're not very old. We're actually extremely young and good looking. But that's not the point. So Leo, we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to pretend I didn't do that because that's the worst thing I've seen myself do recently. But I think mine is kind of the very stereotypical story of, I was kind of just born into a religious family. So I was kind of born into certainly a family that practiced the religion, though I don't think you can necessarily be born into a faith because that's kind of your own personal thing. But I think it definitely made it a lot easier to have that faith built up from a young age. So I was baptized as a wee little baby, and then was just kind of went to Sunday school, did the typical very Catholic thing of there's like a very rigorous Sunday school thing, and then you get your first communion, which I think I never had an issue with believing in a God necessarily, but I don't think I really truly had a full. My faith was not fully fledged at that point. I feel like it was only later as a teenager where I had some things happen in my personal and family life that led me to kind of questioning my faith. And then after kind of that began to resolve, kind of brought me back to my faith, which is when I chose to get confirmed. But yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's quite easy because I was born into it. So it's kind of always been there and the questions have been easily answerable because my parents are both practicing Christians and have been their whole lives. But I also think it didn't necessarily just come easily because of that. I think I only truly am as passionate about my faith as I am now because I have had those bits in my teenage years where I seriously doubted it and was borderline on renouncing my religion. So yeah. But yes, very, very happy as a practicing Christian now. And yeah, that's where we're at.
Perfect. Edward? Also,
Before
hi,
I
Amy.
Zoe says hi. Before I continue, I want to say that Tom has just texted me to say, you know, this just to know, just you're so popular, people keep texting you while you're on the stream. This is a PS.
For anyone that is watching, if you want to follow along and chat along, I am keeping an eye on the YouTube comments, so we'll get your comments in and answered if you've got any questions or just any tidbits, or usually a bit of bullshit if it's Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a PSA that if Tom PMs me one more time during this stream, I'm not responding to it.
Well, at least this time we're not where I'm in the same vicinity as Tom and he just keeps on coming and peeking over my shoulder like something out of The Shining.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Anyway, so yeah, my background. I had a lapsed Church of England dad, because in spite of him being a 6'3" ginger bagpiper, was actually born in England. So and grew up there for the first 10 years of his life, and I think he put Church of England down on his army enlistment form. Anyway, it would be tricky to say whether he harbored a faith or not. But irrespective of what he actually believed, he thought it was at the very least important that I knew the history of the church because it was so heavily intertwined with the history of this country. He certainly wasn't very big on the Church of Scotland historically because they've been, I think, amongst sort of Church of England folks or Pisky folks up here or Roman Catholic folks either, they sort of see the Church of Scotland as being the dour, boring ones. I don't know what answer which is not true, but anyway, maybe was historically, I don't know. In spite of my appearance, I wasn't around in the 17th century. Anyway, I don't know what answer a Presbyterian child would have gotten when they asked their dad who was John Knox, but for those of you who don't know, was the instigator behind the Scottish Reformation. But I know what answer my dad gave, which was he was a nasty man who smashed up lots of nice churches. So John Knox a bit more complicated than that, Dad. Dad is incidentally no longer with us, hence the upstairs wave. Anyway,
I'm glad you like laid that out for us, so we weren't just thinking he was just chilling upstairs.
Yeah, you might he
just might be upstairs somewhere.
Sits above my computer. Yeah. Anyway, my mother was an equally, if not more so, lapsed Roman Catholic. She wasn't a Christmas and Easter Catholic. She was an every other Christmas and every other Easter Catholic. But when she did go to church, she did take me with her. My dad's mum, who I grew up round the corner from, was a practicing Anglican and also wasn't an every Sunday Christian, but she did go fairly regularly, though she could never decide which parish she went to. And when she did go, she would take me with her. So I had a fairly broad experience of Christianity growing up, but fairly quickly I realized that most adults in my life weren't religious of any kind, and it seemed to be that the mature thing to be was irreligious. And spent latter part of my childhood and early part of my teens self-describing as an atheist. We can talk more about it later because I'm hogging the platform.
No, keep going.
Well, all I was going to say was self-describing. I was very anti-religion at the time as well, but I think in hindsight that was definitely a misnomer because I never actually took the direct viewpoint that I did not believe in a God and or that more directly there was no God. And I know what some people are going to say, that means you were an agnostic. No, I was actually closer to believing in God and believing it was the Christian God. I just wasn't interested in worshipping him. Was closer to the line I took. Yada yada yada. For some reason, over the course of my childhood, I ended up regarding myself primarily as a Catholic, even though that was arguably the church I had the least involvement with, probably because of Father Ted was why I ended up gravitating towards saying I was a Catholic. But in my mid-teens, I started singing for evensongs again, which is primarily Anglican. And in my late teens, I met a wonderful man who's also no longer with us, who I later married. He's also sitting above the computer. And we discovered just after we moved in with each other that we had both at one stage been semi-practicing Anglicans. So decided, well, here we are, we're living together, we have Sunday mornings free. Why not start going back to church? So we did. And after about a year of that, I realized how big a shortage of clergy there was and started thinking, oh, maybe I'd be some good at that. And here I am.
And here you are. Amazing. Well, I might as well just give a little bit of my background in So I grew up in a non-religious family. No one in my immediate family is religious. No one really, even my grandparents and stuff, I've never known to be religious. So, but I did attend a church-run toddlers group, or my mother took me to a church-run toddlers group. Not being religious, she just liked the fact that it was free. So that's why she went and took me along. And after that, the older I got, the more I realized that I did actually quite enjoy going to church, etc. I went to Mega Kids Club, shout out Mega Kids Club, which was a Christian-run youth group on a Friday evening. So I started going to that, and I did feel a connection with the Christian faith. And I did start going to church every Sunday, morning and afternoon, etc. But my family had no influence on it, which I think a lot of people find strange, because usually, like, your family have some sort of influence. And I suppose my mum did by taking me to that toddler group. But apart from that, that's realistically the only reason I started going to church. And it wasn't until kind of like my early teens that I started coming away from it, because I found one of my true loves at the time, which was alcohol. And that meant that I had a new interest. And I focused more on going out, etc. I did always think about going back, but the more the media has portrayed faith in particular, and how small-minded some people can be due to faith, it really steered me away from ever going back. And I would identify probably more as agnostic. It's not that I don't believe that there isn't anything, it's just I don't have a particular, what is that? Is it an energy? Is it a god, etc. But I just, the further I've gotten throughout my life, the less I've identified with a faith and with a God that can cause such heartbreak and sorrow and devastation in the world. I've not really been able to get back on the wagon of being a practicing Christian. So that's like a little bit about my background in that. But on that sad note, speaking of faith and religion, do we know if there's a difference between faith and religion and spirituality? We can discuss that a little bit. Is there a difference? Is the difference minuscule? What do we think, Edward? We'll start with you since we started with you last time.
Well, you've made a bad decision starting with me, because I
don't know what you want me to contribute after Edward's done talking. So I don't know what you want me to. I'm just gonna go yes, and that's all I'm going to do.
Okay.
That's everything I'm going to do.
It's not improv, Leo. We can't just yes and it.
Yes,
Leo,
Edward is more qualified than me.
Leo, you sit there and do that again.
I'll sit here and be pretty, and you be smart. That's the combo.
That's the thing about it's like, hey, do an impression of a fuckboy.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, in answer to the question, yes, also there is a huge difference between the three of them. That's not to say they aren't intertwined, and I mean intimately intertwined. Um, I would say that faith is a personal um the personal willingness to believe in things that we can't prove. Also almost synonymous with hope, not quite, obviously. Um, but it's a one of the things about religion in general, Christianity, obviously, is the one I'm going to focus on, obviously, because it's the one that I know the best. One of the things with religion in general is that there's no reason you can't look at it as a rational believer. But in order to become a believer, full stop, you are always going to have faith in certain things which you cannot prove by any rational means. So that's the importance of faith. Spirituality, I would say in a nutshell, is your methods of practicing that faith. You can obviously practice spirituality without any kind of faith or without any kind of religion in the modern day. That I would say is probably the primary way in which most people who are spiritual practice it at all. I know a great deal of spiritual Christians. I'm one of them, I would like to think. But I would say the average person who sits in a pew on a Sunday is not a particularly spiritual person. And I think most of them would admit that. Actually, I really do. They're a believer, they turn up, they sing the hymns, they take communion, and they try to live a good life, but they probably don't pray very much. They probably don't read the Bible very much either. And religion is a guiding set of precepts and framework to help you with both spirituality and faith, I would say. That would be how I would define the three.
Leo?
Yes, and
And I think I would agree also. I I I always perceive faith as being like more personal to you, and then religion was more like the organized faith.
Yeah.
Like kind of just everyone, and then spirituality. I feel like anyone can be spiritual without actually having a faith or a religion. I feel like the hippies of the 60s that were on the shrooms, they were super spiritual.
Yeah.
Like they were just like vibing with nature and with love. That, and you don't need to be practicing anything to do that. Well,
No.
practicing taking drugs, but
No. I'm a practicing drug taker. That is my
I'm a
anyways,
practicing pothead.
Yeah.
yeah, practicing stoner. I am not, mother, if you're listening. I am not. Perfect. Okay. How has your faith community reacted to your LGBTQIA identity? Leo, do you want to start us off with that one?
Yeah, sure. I feel like my answer is quite boring, if I'm entirely honest. I have been, and I'm very aware that with regard to this, I am exceptionally lucky because this is very much not the case, both in terms of just things I've heard kind of throughout my life from media, from other sources, but also from actual friends and stuff. I have never faced any kind of backlash from my church communities in the wake of me coming out as gay and then coming out as trans. Yeah, which is I think there is this idea that as soon as you come out, it's going to be that, at least half church will reject you and that there's going to be all these rumors going around. And I think that's kind of the way the media's painted it. But to be honest, the most recent time I came out, it was just like I went and told, I don't actually go to church near me. If I'm going to church, I tend to go to church down at my parents' because there is not a super liberal church near where I live. But I will be moving down there soon, so I'll get to go to church more often, which will be nice. But yeah, I just rocked up and told just told the clergy like on the way out, like as we were shaking hands, I was like, oh, by the way, I've changed names and pronouns now. And he was just like, oh, okay, cool, I'll try and remember, just remind me if I don't. And then afterwards we had a long chat about transgender representation within the church and also just in life in general over some biscuits and some tea. It honestly, it's been very
That's such a
chill.
British response.
It really is. It really is. Look, the best bit about church, there are many fantastic things about church, but the best bit about church is you get biscuits and tea after.
It's the forgotten eighth sacrament. Yes.
Exactly. Biscuits and tea. Specific to the UK branches
Yes.
of yeah. But so I think it's very interesting because I was very, very worried that I was going to have a lot more backlash than I actually received. But I mean, I have always gone to quite liberal churches because my parents are also quite liberal, so they wouldn't go to a conservative church either.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I've never had any backlash for it, and everyone has been massively supportive, and I've felt that because of that, my faith has helped me with regards to my queerness rather than working as two opposing forces to each other, I suppose. Yeah.
Awesome. Edward?
I have a similar story there, but there are some salient differences. First things first, yeah, no, I mean you think if you come out in a church setting, then half of them are going to immediately tar you, feather you, and throw you out the building.
Yeah.
That never happened to me. It mercifully has not happened to any LGBT plus folks that I know in Britain who are practicing, well, certainly not part of the mainline churches. I don't know anyone personally who's been thrown out of the more fire and brimstone Evangeli Baptist Costal independent churches, but yeah, I don't know anyone personally who's been thrown out of them, but I know of stories. I think the funny thing is that if you were to have come out as gay in America in a mainline church, be that any kind of Protestant or Roman Catholic, in the States, let's say in the 80s, then there'd be a good chance of precisely that happening. If you had done that in this country in the 80s, I think most people, probably most of the congregation would have not necessarily approved, but they would have just gone, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, I just feel like they'd just be like, "Okay."
Yeah.
I mean, we don't like it, but
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have your life.
Yeah, exactly. So this country is obviously the way the media depicts religion. I'm sure you relate to this, Leo. The way the media depicts the religion in general is particularly inaccurate when it comes to the British context and in Scotland especially, if I may say so.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to me. I had an interesting experience because the churches that I grew up attending, and I did actually, for better or for worse. But as I say, my grandmother could never decide which parish she went to. So some of these churches are still ones that I go to from time to time now. But I don't remember any of the people there, and they don't remember me either. So I didn't grow up with church friends as such and things like that. So by the time I ended up coming back to church, as a chorister, I was already out, and half of any choir at least is going to be LGBT plus of some description. So that's always been the case, I think. So that wasn't going to be a controversy. And by the time I ended up coming back to church, as a mere parishioner, I was there with a boyfriend on my arm. So although I would be lying if I said there wasn't some trepidation. Honestly, the first time we went to church together, as you were saying, Leo, I did feel a good degree of trepidation. And in fact, I was telling Amy, my now girlfriend, earlier today, because she came to church with me this morning. She doesn't ordinarily come, but we were going out because it's my birthday this week past. I was telling her, because she's not from the town where we live, I was telling her that we walk down the street and I'll just point out like, oh yeah, that's that building there. I remember when I was 5, X thing happened at that building because I grew up in this town. And I was telling her about the first time I went to the church that I go to now with my late husband, and I suddenly remembered that we were actually accosted. It was Christmas Eve, and there was two drunks who shouted at us something like, "Are you a man or a woman?" and something like that. And I fired back the usual Angel from Rent line about "I'm more of a man than you'll ever be and more of a woman than you'll ever get." And they actually started running after us. They actually did. But all it took was me waving an umbrella at them and saying, "We are going to church," to get them to run off. I'm not
Sorry,
joking.
that's the
Yeah, I
best
know.
way that anyone
Yes.
has ever
Yes.
thought. I'm gonna use that.
Please
I'm
do.
gonna use that.
I
It doesn't
feel
matter. It doesn't matter if
yeah.
it's a Wednesday. I'm
Yeah.
gonna use it. So funny.
Yeah. No,
Not the accosting bit, but
yeah, no, I think I was aiming for his jaw probably, but he was running at me, and he stopped before he was within range anyway. Anyway, I just remember them sort of looking dumb at us and then walking off. So that there was a weird one that the general public gave me more shit as a gay Christian than
yeah,
the church did.
I think that's true of my experience as well. I've had plenty of real fun experiences in public, which we're not going to go into because there are over 100, I want to say. But at church, I don't think I've ever had anything said to me at any point regarding my sexuality or my gender identity, which is interesting.
Yeah, I do. I find that extremely interesting because the first thing you think about, like when it comes to people not being so great towards the LGBTQ, it's usually to do with, oh, I can't have you as a family member anymore because it doesn't fit in with my religion. So you're gonna have to go over there. Bye bye. So that's really interesting, like how you both have like been in these these religious institutions and not felt completely ostracized by them.
I should. Sorry.
Your friend Johnny has commented asking thoughts and ideas on building bridges / lowering divisions between opposing faiths that do not accept each other. Do we have any thoughts on that?
I'm gonna let.
Oh
yes,
no!
Edward,
Yeah.
Edward.
I'm gonna let the man cook. Look, at the end of the day, Edward, you came on the faith episode.
Yes.
Which of us is more experienced
okay,
here? Which of us has?
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Actually, that's true. No.
It's me because I listen to George Michael.
You gotta have faith.
Thinking that whole time.
Anyway,
that song in my head.
I want to say shout out to Johnny, even though I gave him an enormous in joke earlier, and I'll say one thing about what we were just talking about, and then I'll go on to Johnny's question. What I was talking about there was my experiences in public, in real life as a practicing Christian and gay man. That's not to say I haven't had plenty of I would hesitate to say, well, no, I suppose it is actually abuse. I've got a horrible tendency to say that something wasn't abuse because it didn't affect me. But no, it was meant to affect me. It just didn't. So anyway, I've had a hell of a lot of abuse from terminally online people.
Oh God,
yeah. The worst ones that I've ever had are if I actually got to the point where I was copying and pasting the same 3 or 4 paragraph argument about why homosexuality is fine within the context of Christianity, and I would almost always get one of 2 answers. I ain't reading all that, or you're wrong. And them say nothing else. But some of them would try to engage. None of them ever found fault with the argument. I'm not claiming that my argument found its genus in the mind of greatness. I'm simply claiming that they were idiots. And I'm just less of an idiot. Anyway, but yeah, no, online there's still plenty of Christian. And I think maybe these are people who, if there was a LGBT person in their congregation, wouldn't say anything to them, but because it's online, they're happy to say it. I don't know. What I was going to say for Johnny is, I think opposing faiths, I think the main thing to remember is, there's the age-old joke about every religion preaches the golden rule in some way or another. Do unto others as thou wouldst have done unto thee. I think there's a Simpsons line about Ned Flanders phoning Reverend Lovejoy in the middle of the night, and Lovejoy says, "Oh, Ned, have you tried any of the other major religions? They're pretty much the same." Anyway, I often say this about church relations. Now, churches generally in this country at least get on fairly well. As recently as 20, 30 years ago, that wasn't the case. Churches, especially in small towns, would be at each other's throats still. And there has been a great spike in ecumenicism, which is I suppose, the inter-Christian version of being interfaith. And that movement is slowly, the ecumenicist movement I think, is slowly petering out. And I think one of the main reasons for that is that it always ends up manifesting in one of two ways. One is either you end up with a situation where one denomination is the one wearing the big boots, and they're just the ones that are running the whole show, and it just happens to be some Christians from other churches involved. Or you end up with a scenario where all you do is meet up for a joint service once a year that everyone hates because it's not what anyone's used to. I think the best way to do ecumenicism is actually to do what might paradoxically seem to be the opposite, is to actually stop praying with each other, stop worshipping with each other, and start working with each other. In the present day, style of worship is probably the main thing that divides different sorts of Christians. I think you could probably extend that to certainly Abrahamic religions, although there's obviously a lot more doctrinal concerns there. But, an average Protestant service is going to take a very similar format to an average Sabbath service at a synagogue, for example. So what you're really talking about is in effect taste, almost. Although, as I say, this is massively oversimplified. So I think the main thing to do is to remember that we can actually do good together, and to say, look, I know we don't agree about this. I don't want to change your mind. You're not going to change my mind. Let's go and run a soup kitchen and stop talking about the religion, at least with each other. That's what I would say. My segue back to the topic, and I hope that satisfies you, Johnny. I know I'm calling you later, so if you have any more questions, I'll talk to you then. As a segue, in Scotland, the Episcopal Church here, and indeed also the Church of Scotland now, I think, it does actually practice same-sex marriage. It is available on an opt-in basis, if you like. To practice a same-sex marriage, a priest has to opt in to be able to perform them. That was designed to protect people who felt, for whatever reason, in conscience, they couldn't support the change to the canon law. Only one bit. We have 7 bishops in Scotland, about 500 priests, and then a whole load of pew sitters. Only one of the 7 bishops at the time of the vote voted against it. And he voted against it for the reasons you might expect. He said, I'm sorry, I have no problem with LGBT plus folks, but I can't personally conscience a change to what we understand marriage to be. I disagree. I think that's a reasonable theological interpretation. It's not my own, but he's welcome to it. And the reason why I say he's welcome to it is that bishop is now retired. He's one of my best friends. I'm literally not joking. He was well aware of the fact that I was married to a man and all the rest of it. He's not saying I'm less of a person. He's not saying I'm less of a Christian. He's not even saying there's anything wrong with my relationship. He's saying that he could not conscience a change to the marriage canon. Now, that maybe sounds like an odd thing, and it is an odd thing if you ask me, but the point is, there's no reason why, if you're both 100% willing to be respectful and loving, you can't still get on with each other. So that's my ramble over. So I'll let someone else speak now.
Hear that, Putin?
It sounds corny, but I say it all the time.
It's
Look,
so
look,
true though.
It
yeah.
is.
You can have completely varying like political ideologies, like religious ideologies, and still be friends with someone.
Yeah.
It's just having you know the ability to understand that people are allowed to be different and they're still a person.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, just say hi, Daniel. He's just popped in to say hi, Muslim gay here. Actually, Daniel, if you have any comments on, how it is being gay and Muslim, because here we're only talking about Christianity because we are all either previous or current Christians. And we don't really want to speak on other faiths that we don't have as much of an understanding on. So if you have any comments or anything you want to add, feel free to chat away about them, and I will keep an eye on the comments. We need lesbians and gay priests, he said. Honestly, fair.
Hello. I'm nearly there. I don't know if I count anymore. But
I was at your wedding, in a church as well. Which I found I was so surprised when I got the invite and I saw that it was in a church. I was like, what?
Why wouldn't have you been invited? Or were you surprised that
I thought I was invited. Jesus,
Oh.
I knew I was going to be invited. I was surprised it was in a church.
Edward, you picked the wrong one there. You picked the wrong one there. You're going to have to answer for that later.
He's like, of course you'd be invited.
Yeah.
And I'll be invited to the next one as well.
Of course, yes.
Standard. That was a really good discussion on that. You know what? A point that I was wanting to make, but I kept forgetting about it and then remembering about it. When we were talking about, like the whole accosting someone and kind of shunning them, etc. I feel like the British way to deal with things is to just sort of ignore it and pretend it's not a thing. So I feel like that's possibly why, I find it in America especially, they're very upfront in your face about how they feel about things and if they disagree about things. But I feel like over here, when we're likely to disagree with someone and not kind of want to vibe with them, we more are just like, I'll be over here and you be over there. Yep. Rather than be like, you're wrong, you're a terrible excuse of an existence of a person. It's more like, I'm going to separate myself from you and just pretend that you're not a thing.
It's kind of the thing of like, if you don't start, I won't start. Yeah. It's kind of like the universal British agreement. But as soon as one person starts, then God help us all.
Yes.
Literally.
I tell you what, you can come look at the back of my truck. You can find out everything you need to know about me looking at my bumper stickers. Yes.
Daniel says, I mean, in any religion, we at many places have priests joining LGBT pride parades, and I met priests wearing leather, high heels, and collar, and was cool priest. That is giving. Has anyone seen that TV show with Daniel Radcliffe where he's a priest?
Yeah.
Oh yes. Yes.
I agree. I think more priests should wear leather and high heels. More priests and of any sort of religion. Any higher speakers of any religion should be wearing leather and high heels. So, that's the church I'm starting.
See, I'm a big grumpy face, really. So, they can go ahead. I probably wouldn't do it myself, not with the collar. We're about to get floods of comments from Tom saying that I've worn all of the above before. Yes, I have, but and I'd happily wear it again, just not with the collar.
With the collar.
Yeah.
At Pride, the leather. At church, the collar.
Leather.
The two outfits can be mutually exclusive, even though the person who does them is one cohesive human.
No, there's a really good video. I think it's of an American cathedral. I think it's Kentucky or it's a Midwest state anyway. The cathedral's got a Pride banner up, and there's some of the fire and brimstone lads picketing the cathedral outside. The first thing that happens, and Leo, I think you'll appreciate this because we were laughing about choirs. We were laughing about choirs earlier. The first thing, no, because it's the stereotypical thing, like people that have been in a choir school or something like that. They think, oh, goody little two shoes. No. The funniest thing is that the lead pastor from this this angry group. The choir, they're picketing is holding up the service, so the choir start coming out, and there's this girl in the choir who the pastor singles out, and it's like, what are you gonna do after this? Are you gonna sing for some idolatrous mass, and then are you gonna have a gay orgy? And she just goes, yeah.
Was it me? Was it me?
No, she says it, and then she turns to her friends, and her friends sort of acknowledge it as if to say, yeah, sounds great.
Yeah. I'm in, you in?
I mean, that's the only way you should respond to that question. If people are being like dickheads and trying to do the most extreme thing, just be like, yes, and just watch their face and be like, oh.
You pull out the improv. You pull out the improv golden rule. You say yes and
yes, and I've brought my strap, and just see what they do with that. Just see what they do with it.
No, don't! You'll give me a hard on.
No, all the stuff I haven't pressed. No,
this is going really well, guys. Okay, back to the question.
Yeah.
How do you guys find a sense of community and belonging within both your faith and LGBTQIA+ communities? Leo, we'll start with you. Give us a little bit on that.
So sorry, brain blanked for a second. Can you repeat the question one more time? Because words happened and I didn't absorb them.
I said, how do you find a sense of community and belonging within both your faith and LGBTQIA communities? We've kind of touched on it a little bit, but let's delve deeper. Let's go further down that hole. So we all enjoy it all.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. No, I think I think when it comes to community within the LGBT community, I mean, it's events like, for example, Pride, which I was at yesterday. And it's having those spaces and kind of getting to be yourself. And I think church, it's a very similar thing. It's having that space that is specifically designed for, okay, this is the place where we come together. And there may be many, many differences, as there are between me and many other members of the congregation I'm part of. There may be many differences between us politically, socially, whatever. But this is the thing that we come together over. And it's kind of the thing of like, okay, you set everything else aside that you might disagree on, and you kind of enjoy getting to be this thing. And I was about to say like practicing Christianity or whatever it might be, just get to be in the space together. I don't think I've ever found a particularly strong community that does both, interestingly. Because I think that can be a bit of a challenge, and I'm sure you'll have things to say about that as well. But so certainly at this point, they're two separate things within my life. There is my community of queer friends, and then there's my congregation and my community of church friends. But I think both of them kind of serve a very similar purpose of the world is sometimes a big scary place and life is difficult sometimes. And having people around you who understand some part of you in a way that not necessarily everyone else is going to is a fantastic thing to make you feel supported. And so I feel that every week at church, and I felt it very much at Pride yesterday. I will say the only other thing I'll add before I throw over to Edward for his thoughts is I do think it's interesting because, of course, church is something that we have certainly every Sunday and potentially marginally more often, depending what, bits and bobs we've got going on, what time of year we're at. Whereas Pride, obviously I can go to the pub with all my great gay friends, that's completely fine, but Pride is something that only happens once a year. And obviously it's on such a mass scale, but it is one of those things where I'm kind of like, I wish there was like a kind of almost in the same way that we have church, there was like a small little gay thing that happened once a week. I was thinking that at Pride the other day, and I was like, just be so nice to have like a tiny version of this once a week. I feel like it would be very refreshing for me. But yeah, no, it's been, yeah. I think those are all my thoughts.
I think you make some very, very interesting points and parallels that I hadn't actually considered before. The first one that's making me think of is obviously, well, okay, this is starting with a mild disclaimer that there's a myth that's become quite popular that the church was never an institution, and it became an institution with Constantine, and that's just not true. It was a much looser institution in the days of the apostles, but it was still an institution. The reason I say that, I want to make that very clear off the bat, is because it did have leading figures starting off. We wouldn't have had St. Paul's letters, for example, if it didn't have leading figures who were acting as clergy and bishops and all the rest of it. However, it did start in a similar way, and in a similar context to the way that the modern LGBT community started. And that's something that, as in people's houses, out of sight, out of mind, in basements, groups of people who didn't fit in anywhere else coming together just to be themselves. And that I had never considered. And Leo, you've made me realize that. And that's going to be a great Pride Month sermon topic at some point, I think. So thank you for that. I think you're also bang on when you say they share very similar purposes. Even today, there's a priest I know who's very fond of using the phrase that the modern church is persecuted by apathy, is the way he puts it.
Interesting. Okay.
It's that you know, people in this country, we have perfect freedom of religion. People aren't stoning us to death for being Christians or for being LGBT, mercifully, at least not legally anyway. But the vast majority of the population have no interest in any sort of religion, and probably not any interest in spirituality, and that's causing a decline in every faith in the country, so hence persecuted by apathy. As a result, if you go out to a pub with a group of people who aren't Christians and you say, like, oh, I'm a Christian, at least one or two of them will go, oh, really? And it's exactly the same thing, even now.
As if
like,
you say you're gay or you're trans.
Exactly.
It really, hilariously, it
Mhm.
really is.
Mhm.
It really is. In fact, I think I've had, for the most part, I live in London, everyone I know is very liberal. I have more shocked and slightly aghast reactions to my faith than I do my sexuality or my gender.
I've had that as well.
Yeah.
My reaction would be, why?
That's honestly, that's most people's reaction
as well. Yeah.
It's just the amount of people go, really? Oh, really? I was just like, yes. I don't know.
But I think you're also
religious.
right, Leo, that there's not a great degree of overlap. There's plenty of gay Christians, there's plenty of gay religious people, there's plenty of trans religious people, etc., etc. There aren't very many communities, and I think one of the things behind that is you know, there's this I'll speak about St. Paul's letters. It's one of them. I can't remember which one it is now, but it's I have been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who lives, but Christ who lives within me. There's this idea that we've all, as we were saying, the church is a universal thing. We're all, anyone who wants to be a member of it is a member of it. So there, you know, there is no man nor woman, there is no Greek nor Jew, but for you are all one in Christ Jesus. There you go. There's some more St. Paul for you. And yes, that phrase actually is in the Bible. There is no man nor woman nor Greek nor Jew, for you're all one. ... For anyone who's listening who might find that shocking based
That's
on
very Lion King 2 of him.
Yes, it is. It's very. Anyway, what I was going to say is that I think partially it's this notion that Christianity and to my knowledge, most other, if not every mainstream religion, puts an emphasis on all being part of the community, irrespective of who you are out with it anyway. That's possibly number one. I think number two is there are some see, when you talk about liberalism in the church, it's quite difficult because there's sort of three spectrums. There's sort of theological liberalism, moral liberalism, and liturgical liberalism. So you might be someone who thinks the Virgin Mary wasn't a virgin, who is all in favor of gay marriage, but who loves these and thous and dusty old prayer books and things like that. So
absolutely.
In one sense, you might be a conservative. I would say I'm a liturgical conservative. I love these and thous and dusty old prayer books.
I'm a liturgical
Yeah,
conservative as well.
I am not a moral conservative, obviously, hence support for all the rest of it. And theologically, I'd say I'm somewhere in the middle, honest. And the reason I mention that is because I think there is a hesitancy, like I said about the collar with the leather. All for leather, all for Christians wearing leather and having a great time at Pride parades.
With
all
a dog
for,
collar.
all for clergy doing it if they want to. Would I do it?
No.
Yeah.
Maybe
And
not.
the reason why I say that it's tricky for Leo. I'm really glad that Leo's getting it because it's really tricky to make.
No, it is.
Yeah,
But it's also because that's also about your personal battle. Because like, there's a lot of. This is a conversation I have with a lot of my friends. I always say I'm a Christian who is very hard to offend. It's unlikely you're going to make a joke about Christianity and I'm going to be offended. I think there is one time, I can't for the life of me remember what the joke was, but one of my mates did say a joke and I went, pause. That one, there was a line. There was a line.
Yeah.
You went
The line
past
is
it, and he was
well
like,
behind you.
I was like, the line is far away, dude. Yeah, it was not. It was very easy to stay inside, but you decided not to, apparently. But we had a really long discussion after that because I think, you know, because I'm also sure there are Christians who would have heard that joke and been like, that's fine. But I was like, dude, I'm so sorry. I can let you get away with a lot. I'm not letting you get away with that one. That one was too far. But if, you know, another Christian was like, oh, I would have let someone get away with that, I'd be like, cool, fair enough.
Yeah.
If it doesn't bother you, because at the end of the day, your conservatism when it comes to those kind of things is up to you, as long as it's not negatively affecting anyone else. Which largely comes down to your moral conservatism. So
yes, exactly. No, I think the reason I mentioned that sort of 3-axis scale, if you like, is because I think that possibly explains why there aren't very many specifically this is a gay group or a trans group of Christians who meet up regularly, because it would mean it would mean that you have to then
cater to the liturgical styles and
exactly. Although I'm thinking now it's maybe a really good idea, because it would force people to get on, because the funny thing is these are all people who would get on outside of church. But they're not necessarily people who would get on in church.
That's interesting.
Oh my God, this has just been the Edward and Leo Have Ideas show, hasn't it?
we're gonna have a separate Zoom call after this.
I'm still lost at all the different type of liberal things you guys were speaking about. I was just like, well, I'm a Leo with an Aries rising, but but I've enjoyed listening. I have no idea anything that's being spoken about right now. I'm enjoying listening to it.
I'm honestly noting it down, believe it or not. I'm honestly
after this anyway, so it's fine. We can have a chat. Speaking of, you know, the relationship and different LGBTQIA members within the church, etc. How do you guys interpret religious texts that are often cited against those in the LGBTQIA?
Please don't make me go off there, but
go first.
I was going to say, please. I was going to say, you're going first.
I was about to say, I'm going first. I'm like, you go second because I don't want to follow you. I mean, I'm gonna be very annoying and get back into kind of the nitty-gritty of like Christianity and how it works and stuff. I am someone who very much believes in biblical inerrancy. At the end of the day, my view on the Bible, while I think it absolutely does contain the word of God, there is stuff in there that is the word of God, I don't think every single word needs to be interpreted as the most precious thing on the planet, because it is a book from 2,000 years ago written by a group of guys and then compiled by another group of guys who are doing their best to understand this thing that is so beyond human comprehension that how the hell are you meant to put it into words? So, you know, in the same way that I'm like, do I think the world was made in 7 days? Probably not. No, because evolution and stuff. The same kind of thing for me goes with any text that's used against the queer community. I'm like, at the end of the day, if you can point to the bit where it says God spoke to someone and said, or Jesus said, I might have heard your argument a bit more. But this is written by someone else doing their best to interpret what they believe is morally right in the sight of God. But people have gotten that wrong in the past. People will get it wrong far into the future. I'm only taking stuff that's Jesus or God as literal gospel, if that makes sense. Otherwise, it's people doing their best to try and make sense and put words to something that is so beyond anything we can truly understand. And I believe that there are mistakes in that and how it's done.
Yeah. I always envision like Jesus or somebody just reading through the Bible as it is now, being like,
I didn't say that.
I think it's really interesting that the Greek Orthodox Church. I've heard of several Orthodox clergy say things to the effect of, "Yeah, I really don't get this biblical inerrancy thing. If God thought that the book was perfect, he would have just sent the book from heaven. He wouldn't have trusted us to get it all right when we wrote it down."
He would have prime next day delivered that shit.
He would have just been like, it would have just descended from the clouds in a beam of light.
Yes. No. I think broadly speaking, I agree with Leo. I have a slightly higher view of the Old Testament and the New Testament. Well, the rest of it that isn't the Gospels than Leo does. That's not to say I believe more of it is true than Leo does. The reason I'm saying that is because this is sort of my job to try and make it make sense. And
whereas I don't have to do that. Exactly, I just have to go, I like these bits.
Yes, and which incidentally is not cherry picking. It might sound like it is, but I wouldn't class it as cherry picking because, as you say, the bits that matter are, well, the Old Testament is to tell you where we came from.
Yep.
The Gospels are the important bit, and then the rest of the New Testament, excluding Revelation and Acts, is commentary.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to the topic at hand. The first thing I'd say is obviously the passage everyone points to is Leviticus, and man shalt not lie with man, otherwise it would be an abomination. The first thing I want to say is that Leviticus is a pretty damn good set of laws if you want to be a group of homeless people trying to survive in a desert for 40 years. Seriously, you don't want to be, if you're walking through the desert and you find some shellfish, you don't want to eat that shellfish. It shouldn't be there. It's going to kill you probably. You might think that from there I'm then going to go, is it a good set of laws for modern society? Well, no, I don't think it is. I think that's a bit of a cop-out argument, because if you take it as read that this is actually what God believes that you should do, then you can't stop doing it until he tells you that you can stop doing it. Now, Christians have often believed that the purpose of Leviticus was to mark the Jews as the chosen people from whom the Messiah would come. And then the Messiah, who obviously Christians believe is Jesus, there's no longer any reason to keep the law anymore. That is a very common Christian viewpoint, which I sort of subscribe to, but doing my degree has made me realize that that is possibly a misunderstanding of Jewish texts. We're going to run with it for now, because it's still what most Christians, even probably the Pope, actually would stand by, is that Levitical law, i.e. the shellfish bit, the pork bit, the gay sex bit, the mixed fabrics bit.
Isn't it pigskin? Isn't that what it is?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It doesn't count because, in fact, St. Paul actually says as much. St. Paul says it in Ephesians. He says, Christ's death has abolished the whole of the law. You know, you can't get any more
explicit than that.
Yeah, explicit than that. Yes, Zoe.
What if Leviticus just meant that they just shouldn't nap together?
I'd have to look at the Hebrew. My Hebrew's
maybe he was just like, do what you want, be active, but don't have a night times. because you shouldn't be tired together. It could have just been that, guys.
They're actually,
I
funnily
think
enough,
the Hebrew, I believe, does actually translate to night times, if I'm remembering
yes,
correctly,
yeah.
Edward.
But the funniest thing in the
Very
world,
versed in Hebrew.
I'm looking for I'm about to say the most middle class thing I've ever said in my life, I
Oh
think.
God, what is it?
So I don't have any Hebrew really. So I can't tell you what the Hebrew says. I can tell you what the Latin Vulgate says. And
That is the
yeah,
most middle class
yeah.
thing you've ever
And
said.
it does say
Mm.
cum masculo non cum. Yeah. It's mm, no, you there. No, that um it's certainly not saying night times. I'll put it that way. But it's it could be translated in a variety of very creative ways, which I suspect, given the origin of the Latin Vulgate being trying to evangelize Romans, was possibly an intention.
I was about to say,
Yeah.
yeah.
Incidentally, most languages don't translate that verse that way, or didn't until the 20th century, which Leo probably knew. And I think Zoe might know that because I thought I might have mentioned that at some point.
You
The other
probably will have, but I have possibly undiagnosed ADHD, so I'm not going to remember that.
the other thing I was going to say is that a lot of people, even Christians, are under the misconception that the only time the Bible ever mentions homosexuality is in Leviticus, and
No, it's in two other places, isn't it?
yes, it's St.
Yeah.
Paul. St. Paul mentions it twice.
That's what it is.
One time he basically just says it exists and then doesn't say anything else about it. The other time he talks about a party that he witnessed and talks about how disgusted he was to witness the spectacle of people puking on each other and all the rest. It was at a student party, basically, is probably what you can imagine. And he mentioned something to the effect that they were given into their lusts and they lay with each other. The men lay with the men and the women lay with the women. Now, what I think is important to keep in mind here is that the word he uses would in modern Greek mean homosexual. They didn't have a word for the concept that we understand of as homosexual in Greek of that period. Because Greek society, Roman society was a little bit different, as was Macedonian society, but Greek society did not look at homosexuality like we look at it today. It was primarily regarded as something for the upper classes, and it was primarily pedophilic. So what St. Paul is saying is, I don't like it when old men sleep with 12-year-old boys.
Which is fair. I think we can all subscribe to that.
I think we can. There's a joke waiting to happen there, and I think Zoe's.
That I was thinking about it.
It's great to see how times have changed, guys.
The short version is that I think it is possible to interpret scripture in a way that condemns homosexuality, but from a Christian perspective, Leviticus is irrelevant. So, if we're gonna eat shellfish,
Bye, Felicia.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And also St. Paul is St. Paul's a really interesting figure. I really like St. Paul. A lot of people don't like St. Paul. But I really do. And
never met the guy.
Well, no, he's a great laugh.
He's all right.
Yeah.
He's normally the guy in if you ever seen any pictures of saints, he's always the guy who's bald with a beard, looks angry, and has a sword.
Yeah.
This is the description.
He's my father.
I hope not.
Your dad just walking around the house with a sword.
Yeah.
Sword bits in VR, so it's
But basically all I was gonna say is never mind, I gone blank.
But that's fine. Let's say that it's always fun when that happens. The last question, because we're gonna need to wrap up now. Because we've been going for slightly over the hour, and I don't even think I've gotten through half the questions that I'd actually had written out. But the last thing that I want to ask you guys is, what advice do you have for those in the LGBTQIA community that are struggling with their faith? Do you have any advice? Struggling navigating that relationship? I'll let you think about it for a second because I see some. What do I want to say? But yeah, if there is anything that you can think of that you would like to give as advice to people who maybe are struggling to stay connected with their faith while also being someone in the LGBTQIA. And also, Johnny is asking, what's the link with shellfish? I'm not aware and feel ignorant.
Oh, there's a law about
Yeah,
not
there's
eating shellfish.
the in Leviticus, in the same breath that it says that you can't have gay sex, it says that you can't eat shellfish.
Well, I better stop
the-
eating pussy and prawns on the same night then. Damn.
Oh, what a combination.
I'm not going to tell you which one comes first.
I was about to... Yeah, let's not. I feel like either way, I'm like, I don't want to know. Don't want to know which way they go. I think in response to your lovely question about faith.
Before it was debased so thoroughly.
No, I think it's interesting. I think there is an idea, certainly, and I'm sure this is true of a lot of faiths, but certainly within Christianity, as I've experienced it, that until I got older, I hadn't realized that it was a very normal thing to have moments of doubt and periods where you're just less connected to religion for multiple different reasons. Life is happening. There are things that are challenging you. I think that I am certainly someone, and again, I'm not going to say this is true of every Christian. I am someone who has absolutely had periods of not doubting whether or not I believe in God, but similar to what you said earlier, Edward, doubting whether or not I wanted to worship that God, whether or not I thought that God was good or whatever, because it is challenging in the world we live in sometimes. But I think just kind of understanding like it is okay to have doubts and it does not make you a bad Christian or Muslim or like whatever religion it is that you follow. It doesn't make you bad for having those doubts, in particular if they're in relation to your sexuality. That's okay. That's a completely normal thing to happen in your head. And I think also just the only other thing that's massively helped is having conversations with people, not necessarily just other queer Christians, but other queer people / Christians, and kind of just getting to speak, or in some cases actually a few actually queer Christians, yes, just speaking with other people about their own faith, because you'll find a lot of people who have gone through the same kind of things, and it also just helps to kind of process those things out loud with someone who you trust and who maybe understands those things and has that same intersection of identity, so that they'll have a better understanding of what's actually going on in your head. Those are the two pieces of advice I'd give.
Thank you. Edward?
I'd echo what Leo said, and I'd add two things. One is there's a very famous verse from Matthew, which is, "Come unto me, all you that are labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light," i.e., meaning Jesus understands. And I think there's something I always say to any sort of religious person, that when someone's dealing with a time of great suffering, is God is the sufferer. At least in Christianity, that's how we understand it. God is always in the suffering party and is never in the one causing the suffering. Okay, maybe that one's hard to focus on if you're struggling. I know it is. So we'll go a little bit further than that. And we'll make it harder. Now, bear with me. The most important thing that you can do with as a religious person who is struggling with with any issues of faith, especially if that's to do with people you know, obviously, yes, go to the relevant secular authorities if that's necessary. Obviously, stand up for yourself if that's possible. There are plenty of support groups you can reach out to and all the rest of it. The most important thing is not to start hating the people who are hating you. There's a phrase that I'm very fond of, which is not from the Bible, but it might as well be. Liking people is optional. Loving them is compulsory. It is possible to hate someone's guts, but still like them. But you should never do it, if you follow me. Zoe's looking really, really flummoxed now.
I'm fine. I'm good. Yeah, no, I was just I never know when your teachings are going to stop. So I get
Oh,
so
well,
hyper
that's
I get hyper focused on them where I just kind of like I'm
oh.
like really
Oh,
listening.
thank you very much, Zoe. I feel very, very ego inflated now.
I'm good
No,
at that.
yeah, what I was gonna, well, I guess I'll just draw it in a tie it in a bow and say that,
Mhm.
um, always, never be afraid to reach out, especially nowadays. I'm still thinking about prawns. Zoe says,
I've had prawns for my lunch, so yeah. Favorite part of
yeah.
the
So you're
well,
having the other one after, yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want
we'll
to say
see.
that it's never be afraid to reach out, especially in the modern age. That's easier than ever to do. Always pray for your persecutor and always try to love them, even if you don't like them. And I seem to have developed a catchphrase on this show of ending every show by me saying love one another. So I'm going to say it again. There we go.
Amazing. Wonderful. Well, any last minute plugs? Not the butt kind.
I don't have plugs this time. I've wrapped
I
up all
don't
my
know.
projects. I've wrapped up all my. Oh, I will say at some point, our short film, we had a premiere for it recently. It's called The Kerns. It'll be coming out on our YouTube channel called Meishu shortly at some point in the next, I think, few weeks. So watch out for that. Yes, and also follow at Shakespeare is here and at __ Meishu __. Those are my plugs.
The Grand Duke coming to you 2025 at, oh, I can't say the theatre because it's not the one we're usually at.
Oh.
Aberdeen. The probably, we think, Northeast Scotland premiere of a very obscure Gilbert and Sullivan opera coming soon.
Gilbert Sullivan.
Woo! And because I know Johnny's watching and I like him and I like his business, Studio 10, Aberdeen, check them out. They do lots of cool
Yeah,
stuff.
they are great. They're
Yeah.
fantastic. I have seen things. Shout out to Johnny, bro. I know you, you don't know me, but let's get to know each other. Anyways, that has been the final episode of this season of Queer Confab. It's been a wonderful time chatting with you guys. Thanks so much to all our guests that have appeared on this season. And hopefully we'll see you soon. Enjoy the summer, guys. Also,
Thanks,
bye
you too.
Pride Month. Bye Pride Month. Miss you already. We love you. See